The smoldering ruins of Ventax Prime crumbled into ash, its proud alien towers blasted into unrecognizable heaps by ruthless human weapons. High above the ruins of his homeworld, Cade stared through the viewport of his command ship, eyes wide with disbelief. The humans had done this, those pathetic, primitive apes from that backwater planet called Earth. Cade clenched his fists, remembering how he had scoffed at the notion that humans posed any threat to the glorious Ventaxian Empire. He had conquered dozens of star systems, crushing every species that dared resist. Humanity should have been no different. He had lobbied the Emperor for a full-scale invasion, eager to grind Earth's cities to dust beneath his armored boots. But the Emperor's advisors had urged caution and subtlety. Why waste resources on an open war when they could destroy the humans from within? Cade had reluctantly agreed to their plan. For years, Ventaxian agents had infiltrated Earth, sabotaging infrastructure and fomenting chaos. Humanity had seemed oblivious, too caught up in their petty squabbles to notice the spider's web closing around them. Finally, with Earth ripe for conquest, Cade had assembled his invasion fleet and set course for the human system, already savoring the terror he would see in their eyes. In a matter of days, that blue and green marble would be his, its people enslaved or exterminated as he saw fit. Earth's feeble militaries would be powerless against the might of the Ventaxian war machine. Or so he had thought. Everything had gone wrong from the moment they arrived. The humans were waiting for them, armed with weapons and technologies far beyond what Ventaxian intelligence had predicted. Cade stared through the viewport, his mind reeling from the impossible turn of events. How could it have gone so wrong? They had planned this invasion for years, carefully eroding humanity's defenses from within. And yet, in a matter of hours, it had all come crashing down around him. The day of the invasion played out in his mind like a waking nightmare. As the Ventaxian fleet emerged from hyperspace near Earth, they were immediately engulfed in a storm of laser fire and missiles. The humans had been waiting for them, their defenses hidden until the perfect moment to strike. Cade watched in horror as his ships were torn apart, their hulls breached and venting atmosphere into the void. "Evasive maneuvers," he barked at the crew, his voice tinged with desperation. "Get us out of their firing solution." But it was too late. The human weapons were too accurate, their targeting systems too advanced. Ventaxian ships exploded left and right, reduced to nothing more than expanding clouds of debris. In a matter of minutes, nearly half of Cade's fleet had been annihilated. In desperation, he ordered the remaining ships to launch a full-scale ground assault. If they could get their troops onto the surface, they could still salvage the invasion. The drop ships raced toward Earth's atmosphere, filled to the brim with Ventaxian soldiers eager for blood. But as they landed, they were met with a sight that chilled Cade to the bone. Human soldiers clad in advanced powered armor and wielding energy weapons that glowed with an eerie blue light. They moved with a speed and precision that the Ventaxians had never encountered before, their weapons cutting through armor like it was made of paper. Cade could only watch as his troops were slaughtered, their screams echoing across the comms. The humans fought like demons, each one willing to lay down their life to defend their home. They had been preparing for this day, and their resolve was unbreakable. As the battle raged on, a panicked voice came over the comm. "Commander Cade, we have a breach in the command ship. Human strike team, they're heading for the bridge." Cade felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach. How had they gotten on board? He spun around, reaching for his sidearm, but it was already too late. The bridge doors exploded inward, and a group of humans stormed in, weapons blazing. At their head was a soldier, with eyes that burned with an intensity Cade had never seen before. He moved like lightning, his rifle spitting deadly bolts of energy as he cut down the bridge crew, with ruthless efficiency. Cade found himself face to face with the soldier, his sidearm shaking in his hand. He saw his own fear reflected in the human's eyes, but behind that fear was something else. A resolve, a fury that seemed to burn like a supernova. "Surrender," the human said, his voice cold as the void. "It's over." Keed looked around the bridge at the bodies of his crew, at the screens showing the devastation on the planet below. He knew the human was right. It was over. The Ventaxians had been defeated, not by superior numbers or firepower, but by the sheer indomitable will of humanity. With a shaking hand, he reached for the comm. "All units, this is Commander Keid. Cease fire and retreat. I repeat, cease fire and retreat." As he spoke the words, he felt a profound sense of shame and despair wash over him. The Ventaxian Empire had been shattered, its invincible armies reduced to ashes and debris. And it was all because of the humans, the species they had dismissed as primitive and weak. Keid looked back at the human soldier, his eyes hard as diamonds. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The human soldier stared at Keid for a long moment, his eyes hard and unforgiving. "You will face justice for your crimes," he said. "The Ventaxian Empire has brought nothing but suffering and death to the galaxy. It's time for that to end." Keid could only nod in stunned silence as human soldiers swarmed the bridge, securing the ship and rounding up the surviving crew members. In a matter of hours, the once proud Ventaxian fleet had been reduced to a collection of battered, smoking hulks drifting in Earth's orbit. As Keid was led away in shackles, he caught a final glimpse of Earth through the viewport. The blue and green marble seemed to mock him, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. They had won, against all odds, and Keid knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The journey back to Ventax Prime was a somber one. The few ships that had survived the battle limped through hyperspace, their crews shell-shocked and demoralized. Keid sat in his cell, numb with disbelief and shame. How could he face his people after such a catastrophic failure? When they finally arrived at Ventax Prime, Keid was dragged before the Emperor in chains. The once mighty ruler was apoplectic with rage, his face twisted into a mask of fury as he denounced Keid as a traitor and a failure. "You have brought shame upon the Ventaxian Empire," the Emperor roared. "Your incompetence has cost us everything." Keid could only hang his head in shame as the Emperor ranted and raved. When the tirade was finally over, the sentence was handed down: exile. Keid would be stripped of his rank and banished to a remote outpost on the fringes of Ventaxian space, left to live out his days in disgrace and obscurity. For months Keid wallowed in his misery on the desolate outpost, his thoughts consumed by bitterness and the desire for revenge against the humans who had humiliated him. He spent his days poring over the reports of the battle, obsessing over every detail, every mistake that had led to their defeat. But then one day an urgent message arrived from Ventax Prime. A human fleet had appeared at the edge of Ventaxian space, led by none other than Noah Murray himself. The humans, it seemed, had not been content with their victory at Earth. They had come to finish what they started, to end the Ventaxian threat once and for all. Keid watched from his outpost as the human ships tore through the Ventaxian defenses like a hot knife through butter. Their weapons were even more advanced than before, their tactics flawless and ruthless. It was clear that they had been holding back during the initial invasion, keeping their true capabilities hidden until the time was right. As the reports flooded in of Ventaxian ships being destroyed and colonies falling one by one, Keid realized the terrible truth. The humans had never intended to stop at Earth. They had come to conquer, to eradicate the Ventaxian Empire from the face of the galaxy. And now they were closing in on Ventax Prime itself. Panic gripped the Ventaxian people as the human fleet approached their homeworld. The Emperor, in a desperate bid to save his own skin, fled the planet aboard his personal yacht, leaving his people to their fate. Keid watched the chaos unfold from his remote outpost, a bitter smile twisting his lips. The Emperor had abandoned them, just as he had abandoned Keid. But as he watched the human ships draw ever closer, Keid felt a stirring of something within him, a sense of duty, of purpose that he thought had been lost forever. He was still a Ventaxian, still a warrior. And if his people were to fall, he would fall with them. With a newfound resolve, Keid gathered what loyal troops he could find and prepared to make a last stand against the human invaders. He knew it was hopeless, that they stood no chance against the might of the human fleet, but he would not let Ventax Prime fall without a fight. He would show the humans the true spirit of the Ventaxian people, even in their darkest hour. As dropships full of human soldiers began to land on the surface, Cade rallied his troops for one final battle. He could see the fear in their eyes, but also the determination, the pride. They would not go quietly into the night. They would make the humans pay for every inch of Ventaxian soil. Cade strode to the front lines, his weapon in hand, ready to face his destiny. He could see the human soldiers advancing, their armor gleaming in the sunlight, their weapons ready. At their head was Noah Murray, his eyes blazing with the same intensity Cade had seen on the bridge of his ship. But this time, Cade felt no fear, only a grim sense of acceptance, of inevitability. He had been a fool to think that the Ventaxians could conquer the galaxy, that they were superior to all other races. The humans had shown him the truth, had shattered his illusions of grandeur. As the human forces surged through the crumbling defenses of the Ventaxian capital, the crack of energy weapons and the screams of the dying filled the air. Cade rallied his troops for a desperate last stand, taking cover behind the rubble of once grand buildings as they poured fire into the advancing humans. But for every human that fell, two more seemed to take their place, their armor shrugging off the Ventaxian weapons like they were nothing. Cade watched in horror as his soldiers were cut down one by one, their blood staining the shattered streets. Suddenly, a familiar figure emerged from the chaos, Noah Murray, his armor scorched and battered, but his eyes still burning with that same intense resolve. Cade felt a surge of rage and leapt forward, his own weapon blazing. The two warriors clashed in the midst of the battle, their armor sparking as they traded blows. Cade was a skilled fighter, but Murray was something else entirely. Faster, stronger, his movements fluid and precise. Cade felt himself being driven back, his defenses crumbling under the relentless onslaught. With a final, desperate effort, Cade lunged forward, his blade aimed at Murray's throat. But the human was too quick. He sidestepped the blow and brought his own weapon around in a crushing arc. Cade felt the impact through his entire body and was thrown to the ground, his armor shattered. As he lay there, gasping for breath, Murray stood over him, his weapon pointed at Cade's head. Cade waited for the killing blow, but it never came. Instead, Murray spoke, his voice hard and cold. "We didn't want this war, Cade. Your people brought this upon themselves. We offered peace, but you chose conquest. Now you will pay the price." With that, Murray turned and walked away, leaving Cade to his fate. Around him the battle raged on, but Cade barely noticed. His thoughts were turning inward, to the realization that was slowly dawning on him. The Ventaxians had been fools. They had looked at humanity and seen only weakness, a primitive species ripe for conquest. But they had been wrong. The humans had a strength that went beyond mere technology or numbers. They had a spirit, an unbreakable will that had allowed them to stand against the might of the Ventaxian Empire and emerge victorious. Cade's eyes turned to the sky, where the human ships hung like avenging angels. He knew that it was over, that the Ventaxian Empire was finished. His people would be remembered as the ones who had dared to challenge humanity and paid the ultimate price. As his vision began to fade, Cade felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. In a way, this was a fitting end. The Ventaxians had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and now they would reap the bitter harvest. With a final, bitter laugh, Cade closed his eyes and let the darkness take him, knowing that his legacy would be one of hubris and defeat. The smouldering ruins of Ventax Prime stretched out before Noah Murray as he surveyed the once mighty capital. The towering spires that had pierced the sky now lay toppled, reduced to rubble and ash. The streets, once bustling with the arrogant stride of Ventaxian warriors, now echoed with the desperate scrabbling of a broken people. Murray watched as a group of Ventaxians, their proud bearing long since shattered, picked through the debris of a collapsed building, searching for anything of value. Their clothes hung in tatters, their faces gaunt and haunted. The sight stirred something in Murray, a feeling he had not expected, pity. He turned to the human soldier at his side, a grizzled veteran of the war. "We need to get supplies down here, food, medicine, shelter. These people are starving." The soldier frowned, his eyes hard. "With all due respect, sir, these people are the same ones who tried to wipe us out. They brought this on themselves." Murray shook his head. "The war is over. We won. Now it's time to rebuild." But as he walked through the ruined streets, Murray could feel the tension in the air. Human soldiers patrolled the city, their weapons at the ready, watching the Ventaxians with wary eyes. The Ventaxians, in turn, glared at their conquerors with a mixture of fear and hatred. "So it won't be easy," Murray muttered to himself, "but we have to try." Over the next few months, Murray threw himself into the task of reconstruction. He worked tirelessly to establish supply lines, bringing in food and medicine from human worlds. He organized work crews to clear the rubble and begin rebuilding the shattered infrastructure. But at every turn, he faced resistance. Many of his fellow humans, still reeling from the invasion and the loss of loved ones, wanted nothing more than to see the Ventaxians ground into the dust. They resented the resources being poured into rebuilding a civilization that had tried to destroy them. The Ventaxians, too, were far from cooperative. Their pride still stung from the defeat, and many saw the human efforts as a humiliating charity. They bristled under the watchful eyes of the human soldiers, feeling more like prisoners than a people being helped. Tensions came to a head when a group of human soldiers, their patience frayed by the constant hostility, clashed with a mob of angry Ventaxians in the streets. Blows were exchanged, shots fired. By the time Murray arrived on the scene, several Ventaxians lay dead and wounded, and the fragile peace he had worked so hard to build teetered on the brink of collapse. In that moment, Murray realized that he needed to try a different approach. He couldn't just impose a peace from above, he needed to build a new understanding between their two peoples. He called a meeting with the surviving Ventaxian leaders, including the exiled emperor himself. They came reluctantly, their faces lined with suspicion and disdain. Murray took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I know there is no love lost between our peoples. We have fought, we have bled, we have lost. But now we stand at a crossroads. We can continue down this path of hatred and mistrust and watch both our civilizations crumble into dust, or we can choose a different way." The Ventaxians stirred, muttering amongst themselves. The emperor, his once resplendent robes now faded and torn, stepped forward. "And what way is that human? Subjugation, slavery?" Murray met the emperor's gaze unflinchingly. "No partnership. We are willing to help you rebuild, to share our resources and knowledge. But in return, you must renounce your dreams of conquest and commit to living in peace with your neighbors." The emperor's eyes narrowed. "You ask us to abandon our very way of life, to forget generations of tradition and ambition." "I ask you to adapt," Murray countered, "to learn from your mistakes as we have learned from ours. This war has changed us all. We cannot go back to what we were before, but perhaps together we can build something new, something better." The Ventaxians fell silent, considering Murray's words. For a long moment, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Then slowly the emperor nodded. "Very well, human. We will try your way, but know this, the Ventaxian spirit will never be broken. We will rise again, not as conquerors, but as equals." Murray smiled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. It was a start, a fragile beginning, but it was something. In the years that followed, Murray worked side by side with the Ventaxians to rebuild their shattered world. It was a long and arduous process, fraught with setbacks and challenges. The scars of war ran deep, and trust was a fragile thing. But slowly, incrementally, things began to change. Human engineers shared their knowledge of advanced construction techniques, helping to erect new cities from the ashes of the old. Ventaxian scientists, their brilliance no longer shackled to the engines of war, turned their minds to the challenges of agriculture and medicine. There were moments of tension, of old grudges flaring to the surface, but there were also moments of understanding, even friendship. Murray watched as human children played with Ventaxian youngsters in the newly built parks, their laughter ringing through the air. He saw Ventaxian and human workers toiling side by side to raise a new hospital, their sweat mingling in the dust. Slowly but surely, Ventax Prime began to heal. The ruins gave way to new structures, the despair to a tentative hope, and in the midst of it all, Murray felt himself changing too. The hard edges of his soldier's spirit softened, tempered by the challenges of rebuilding and the unexpected bonds he had formed. He knew that the scars of the war would never fully fade for either of their peoples, but as he looked out over the slowly recovering planet, he felt a sense of hope. They had been given a second chance, an opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the past and build a better future. It would not be easy. There would be obstacles and setbacks, moments when the old hatreds threatened to resurface, but they would face them together, Ventaxian and human side by side. For in the end, they had both learned the cost of arrogance and the power of forgiveness, and in that shared understanding, perhaps there was the seed of something greater, a new beginning, rising from the ashes of war. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video, then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.